Welcome back to the final segment of Pivot Point with Maya Rockymore. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Sharon Morris. She's the Communications Director at the Mississippi Center for Justice. Welcome, Sharon.
Hi, Maya. This is actually Martha Bergmark, the president of the Mississippi Center for Justice, and I'm delighted to be on the phone with you.
Martha, it's a pleasure to have you as well.
You.
Thank you for joining me.
Thanks.
So listen, Martha, I know that Mississippi has been intransigent with regards to the adoption of the Affordable Care Act provisions with focused on Medicaid. Can you tell us more about the challenges you're facing?
Yeah, sure. It's, well, as you know, nationally, the tide seems to be shifting. I think Governor Christie in New Jersey was the most recent Republican governor to see that Medicaid expansion is really a no-brainer. And we're working hard to try to make sure our Republican-led government goes the same way.
So let me just back up and contextualize for my listeners. As you know, the Affordable Care Act was sought to actually expand health care for many more Americans that currently get covered by, in part, providing affordable health care insurance through the health insurance exchanges, but also, in part, by expanding Medicaid. Yet many Republican governors have been very resistant. In fact, they said, and the Supreme Court has backed up, that they do not actually have to abide by the portion of the Affordable Care Act that actually expands Medicaid. And so Republican governors have been, saying no. But now, after the elections, we're seeing slowly but surely, one by one, Republican governors saying yes. But in Mississippi, there's a different situation. What is the political calculation your governor is making?
Well, I'd say that our governor, despite his very strong statements drawing line in the sand on this, is getting a big dose of the reality that this is the only way for Mississippi to go is to expand Medicaid. Mississippi is the poorest state in the country. It has some of the worst rates of obesity, of diabetes, of hypertension, so our health care outcomes are abysmal, which goes with that poverty situation. And we also have some of the one of the highest percentages of people who would be eligible for this Medicaid expansion, which goes up to 138% of poverty. Most of those are hardworking Mississippians whose low wages, though, don't permit them to have health insurance. So we've got we would be terribly hit by a decision to reject expansion of Medicaid, and we would have a huge amount to gain if we did expand Medicaid. The Kaiser Family Foundation estimates that for every dollar Mississippi invests in Medicaid expansion, we will receive between $14 and $15 from the federal government. Our state's economist has estimated that the accepting Medicaid would generate about 9,000 new jobs in the healthcare field. And we face a situation where Mississippians will be paying taxes that support Medicaid expansion elsewhere, even if we don't accept it ourselves. So we have a lot to lose if we reject it. We have maybe the most of any state to gain if we do accept it. So I think our governor is confronting that, especially as our more and more state leaders sort of get in line behind the notion that this is really a no-brainer for us.
So you've been making the economic argument. I've actually read an article by Linda Rigsby in your shop, who actually points to the fact that you also, as a job creator, that you would create more jobs in addition to, and the fact that you'd be paying it for it anyway in terms of uncompensated care. So why not do the right thing for people? Do you think that this argument is actually gaining traction?
You know, I think it is. Increasingly, more and more, especially of our healthcare providers, are coming out to just say, we need to do this. The CEO of one of our largest hospitals on the coast just yesterday said so, and we have Republican legislators. We had a Republican legislator yesterday say that it's going to be hard to develop a credible argument against expansion. So I think pressure is building because it's simply not only the right thing to do, it's also the economically most beneficial thing to do for everyone in our state.
Right. Martha, I actually also focus on the prevention side. And
Yes.
as some of my listeners may know, the Affordable Care Act also made historic investments in primary prevention, particularly community-based efforts to try to get people to be more physically active, to eat healthier, so that we can also focus on the front end. In Mississippi, you talked about the high rates of overweight and obesity, the high rates of type 2 diabetes, all obesity-related conditions that are preventable. What is Mississippi doing on the prevention side to get this under control?
Well, sadly, our governor has made statements like, well, we have adequate health care in Mississippi because that's what emergency rooms are for.
Oh, my gosh.
So we have a wonderful university medical center, a point of pride in the state, that has amazing programs on obesity. We have the Jackson Medical Mall Foundation, which has done remarkable work around the state creating healthcare homes. So there are some tremendous efforts going on, and yet to shoot ourselves in the foot by rejecting the Medicaid expansion would just take us drastically in the other direction.
You know, Martha, I want to explore. I mean, emergency room care is the worst and most expensive way to get care in this country.
Well, and certainly for chronic diseases like diabetes and hypertension and obesity, it's not a solution at all, as you know.
So my question is, what is feeding into the governor and the state legislature's resistance to this idea? Do you think sometimes I feel like there is such a disregard for people who have modest means that people just don't care? What do you think the motivation is?
Well, I think our Republican leadership is not unlike our Republican leadership elsewhere in the country. I think some of the most strident statements that seemed least compassionate and least productive got made shortly after the Supreme Court ruled last summer that Medicaid expansion was optional. But I think those statements were largely in anticipation of an election that they hoped might turn around the Obamacare itself.
Mm-hmm.
I think once the election happened in the fall, we've seen several other states by now, Republican-led states, make the practical decision, even though I don't doubt that they still ideologically are probably opposed, clearly are opposed to Obamacare. Mm-hmm. So I thought Governor Rick Scott in Florida was interesting in combining that practical argument, though, with, acknowledging compassion for hardworking Floridians that were otherwise unable to get health care. So we are, our organization and many others, there's a very strong coalition that has come together around the Medicaid expansion issue, the Mississippi Healthcare Access Coalition, and we urge you to check it out at accessms.org. Getting the facts out, getting the arguments out, recruiting the partners, and our intention is to just keep trying to get that message across and get it across to our governor and our legislative leaders who I think are not immune from both the compassion argument and the just straight economic benefit argument that Medicaid expansion is the way to go.
You know, we just had a guest on who was talking about the outsized role of big money in our political system, and how normal, average, everyday people don't really get to hear their voices heard, get to have their voices heard at the national level. But it sounds like at the state level there is a chance to actually turn things around in a more direct way. Do you feel like you are about to flip this switch and get the Medicaid expansion in Mississippi?
I certainly hope so, Maya. I don't know. I think it's too early to predict, and I think the battle is fiercely engaged at the moment.
Okay.
But I do see the drumbeat of leaders in our state increasingly saying we just can't afford to do this to ourselves.
Right.
This is not where we need to be. How it will come out, we'll have to wait and see. But our organization at the Mississippi Center for Justice and our partners in the Healthcare Access Coalition are going to be taking this right down to the wire.
Okay, and my final question for you is tell us about your center. Mm-hmm.
The Mississippi Center for Justice is 10 years old this year. Mm-hmm. We are the first homegrown legal and policy advocacy organization to replace what we had during the Civil Rights Movement. We had organizations like the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, national groups. But what we realized we had to have 10 years ago was a homegrown capacity for advancing racial and economic justice in our state using tools like legal advocacy, policy advocacy, community organizing, and so forth. And there are some other wonderful groups that do that. Our special value added has to do with the legal and policy advocacy piece.
And your website?
Our website is mscenterforjustice.org, and I urge you to please check us out. We work in areas as well as health care. We work on access to affordable housing, educational opportunity, consumer protection. We had a major role post-Katrina in trying to ensure that our hurricane recovery dollars went to folks who needed them most, and that involved litigation and all kind of advocacy to make sure that happened.
Well, Martha, I want to thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate your insight, and we look forward to hearing about and watching the progress taking place in Mississippi.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your having me on.
All right. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
And with that, we have had a very interesting show today. Peter, how does the quote go about the long arc of justice and it bends towards, I think it was Martin Luther King.
I think it is bends, it's a good one.
The arc of justice is long, but it bends towards justice.
Yeah, or it bends towards like the righteous or something like that.
Well, it bends towards justice.
Okay.
But the issue here is I think it's the actions of everyday, ordinary people like we've heard today, you know, the Don Owens of the world, the Adams from Demos, Martha from Mississippi. These are the folks who are beating down the doors to make sure that we have a just America. And so with that, it is because of these people
that you got to remember, as everyday citizens, you can go out, you can organize your neighborhood. You don't have to come to D.C. and work for a think tank.
You don't have to work for a think tank.
You
can do this
that matter
in your neighborhood. And so I am encouraged that despite the role of big money, despite the direction that I feel like we've taken a bad turn, I think that we can pull it back, and it's through the goodwill and intent and the values of people everywhere like that. So I mean, it's been a great show today, Peter.
Wonderful show.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maya.
And thanks to everyone in my listening audience for joining us for yet another edition of Pivot Point with Maya Rockymore. As always, I'd like to give a shout out to my show's production team, Peter James Callahan, Courtney the intern, Rich Webster. And finally, I'd like to remind our listening audience to please join us live every Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, or you can listen anywhere in the world on weactradio.com. Until next time, America.